Title, 04. Ablutions, Wudu. 1. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, the prayer of a person who does hadith, passes urine, stool or wind, is not accepted till he performs the ablution. A person from Hadramaut asked Abu Huraira, what is hadith? Abu Huraira replied, hadith means the passing of wind. 2. Narrated Nu'aym al-Mujmir, once I went up the roof of the mosque, along with Abu Huraira. He performed ablution and said, I heard the Prophet, saying, on the day of resurrection, my followers will be called al-Ghurul Muhajjalin from the trace of ablution, and whoever can increase the area of his radiance should do so, i.e. by performing ablution regularly. 3. Narrated Abad bin Tamim, my uncle asked Allah's Messenger, about a person who imagined to have passed wind during the prayer. Allah's Apostle replied, he should not leave his prayers unless he hears sound or smells something. 4. Narrated Kurayb ibn Abbas said, the Prophet slept till he snored and then prayed, or probably lay till his breath sounds were heard and then got up and prayed. Ibn Abbas added, I stayed overnight in the house of my aunt, Maymuna. The Prophet slept for a part of the night, see Fath al-Bari page 249, volume 1, and late in the night, he got up and performed ablution from a hanging water skin, a light, perfect, ablution, and stood up for the prayer. I, too, performed a similar ablution, then I went and stood on his left. He drew me to his right and prayed as much as Allah wished, and again lay and slept till his breath sounds were heard. Later on the Mu'adh call maker for the prayer, came to him and informed him that it was time for prayer. The Prophet went with him for the prayer without performing a new ablution. Sufyan said to Amr that some people said, the eyes of Allah's Messenger sleep but his heart does not sleep. Amr replied, I heard Ubayd bin Umar saying that the dreams of prophets were divine inspiration, and then he recited the verse, I, Abraham, see in a dream, O my son, that I offer you in sacrifice, to Allah. 37.102, see Hadith No. 5. Narrated Usama bin Zaid, Allah's Messenger, proceeded from Arafat till when he reached the mountain pass, he dismounted, urinated and then performed ablution but not a perfect one. I said to him, is it the time for the prayer, O Allah's Messenger? He said, the place of prayer is ahead of you. He rode till when he reached Al-Muzdalifah, he dismounted and performed ablution and a perfect one, the call for Iqama was pronounced and he led the Maghrib prayer. Then everybody made his camel kneel down at its place. Then the Iqama was pronounced for the Isha prayer which the Prophet led, and no prayer was offered in between the two prayers, Isha and Maghrib. 6. Narrated Atta bin Yasar, Ibn Abbas performed ablution and washed his face, in the following way: he ladled out a handful of water, rinsed his mouth and washed his nose with it by putting in water and then blowing it out. He then took another handful of water, and did like this, gesturing, joining both hands, and washed his face, took another handful of water and washed his right forearm. He again took another handful of water and washed his left forearm, and passed wet hands over his head and took another handful of water and poured it over his right foot, up to his ankles, and washed it thoroughly, and similarly took another handful of water and washed thoroughly his left foot, up to the ankles, and said, I saw Allah's Messenger performing ablution in this way. 7. Narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet said, if any one of you on having sexual relations with his wife said, and he must say it before starting, in the name of Allah. O Allah! Protect us from Satan and also protect what you bestow upon us, i.e. the coming offspring, from Satan, and if it is destined that they should have a child, then Satan will never be able to harm that offspring. 8. Narrated Anas, whenever the Prophet went to answer the call of nature, he used to say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-kubuthi wal khabith, i.e. O Allah, I seek refuge with you from all offensive and wicked things, evil deeds and evil spirits. 9. Narrated Ibn Abbas, once the Prophet entered a lavatory and I placed water for his ablution. He asked, who placed it? He was informed accordingly, and so he said, O Allah! Make him, Ibn Abbas, a learned scholar in religion, Islam. 10. Narrated Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, Allah's Messenger, said, if any one of you goes to an open space for answering the call of nature, he should neither face nor turn his back towards the Qibla, he should either face the east or the west. 11. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, people say, whenever you sit for answering the call of nature, you should not face the Qibla or Baitul Maqdis, Jerusalem. I told them. Once I went up the roof of our house and I saw Allah's apostle answering the call of nature while sitting on 2 bricks facing Baitul Maqdis, Jerusalem, but there was a screen covering him. Fath al-Bari, page 258, vol. 12. Narrated Aisha, the wives of the Prophet, used to go to Al-Manasi, a vast open place, near Baqi at Medina, to answer the call of nature at night. Umar used to say to the Prophet, let your wives be veiled, but Allah's apostle did not do so. One night Sauda bint Zama, the wife of the Prophet, went out at Isha time and she was a tall lady. Umar addressed her and said, I have recognized you, O Sauda. He said so, as he desired eagerly that the verses of Al-Hijab, the observing of veils by the Muslim women, may be revealed. So Allah revealed the verses of Al-Hijab, a complete body cover excluding the eyes. 13. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet, said to his wives, you are allowed to go out to answer the call of nature. 14. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, I went up to the roof of Hafsa's house for some job and I saw Allah's Messenger, answering the call of nature facing Sham, Syria, Jordan, Palestine and Lebanon regarded as one country, with his back towards the Qibla. See Hadith No. 15. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, once I went up the roof of our house and saw Allah's Messenger, answering the call of nature while sitting over 2 bricks facing Baitul Maqdis, Jerusalem. See Hadith No. 16. Narrated Anas bin Malik, whenever Allah's Messenger went to answer the call of nature, I along with another boy used to accompany him with a tumbler full of water. Hisham commented, so that he might wash his private parts with it. 17. Narrated Anas, whenever Allah's Messenger went to answer the call of nature, I along with another boy from us used to go behind him with a tumbler full of water. 18. Narrated Anas bin Malik, whenever Allah's Messenger went to answer the call of nature, I along with another boy used to carry a tumbler full of water, for cleaning the private parts, and a short spear, or stick. 19. Narrated Abu Qatada, Allah's Messenger, said, whenever any one of you drinks water, he should not breathe in the drinking utensil, and whenever any one of you goes to a lavatory, he should neither touch his penis nor clean his private parts with his right hand. 20. Narrated Abu Qatada, the Prophet, said, whenever any one of you makes water he should not hold his penis or clean his private parts with his right hand. And while drinking, one should not breathe in the drinking utensil. 21. Narrated Abu Huraira, I followed the Prophet, while he was going out to answer the call of nature. He used not to look this way or that. So, when I approached near him he said to me, fetch for me some stones for cleaning the private's parts, or said something similar, and do not bring a bone or a piece of dung. So I brought the stones in the corner of my garment and placed them by his side and I then went away from him. When he finished, from answering the call of nature, he used them. 22. Narrated Abdullah, the Prophet, went out to answer the call of nature and asked me to bring 3 stones. I found 2 stones and searched for the third but could not find it. So took a dried piece of dung and brought it to him. He took the 2 stones and threw away the dung and said, this is a filthy thing. 23. Narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet, performed ablution by washing the body parts only once. 24. Narrated Abdullah bin Zaid, the Prophet, performed ablution by washing the body parts twice. 25. Narrated Humran, the slave of Uthman, I saw Uthman bin Affan asking for a tumbler of water, and when it was brought, he poured water over his hands and washed them thrice and then put his right hand in the water container and rinsed his mouth, washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out. Then he washed his face and forearms up to the elbows thrice, passed his wet hands over his head and washed his feet up to the ankles thrice. Then he said, Allah's Messenger said, if anyone performs ablution like that of mine and offers a 2 rakat prayer during which he does not think of anything else, not related to the present prayer, then his past sins will be forgiven. 26. After performing the ablution, Uthman said, I am going to tell you a hadith which I would not have told you, had I not been compelled by a certain holy verse. The sub-narrator Urwa said, this verse is, verily, those who conceal the clear signs and the guidance which we have sent down. 2:159. I heard the Prophet, saying, if a man performs ablution perfectly and then offers the compulsory congregational prayer, Allah will forgive his sins committed between that prayer and the next prayer till he offers it. 27. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, whoever performs ablution should clean his nose with water by putting the water in it and then blowing it out, and whoever cleans his private parts with stones should do it with odd number of stones. 28. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, if any one of you performs ablution he should put water in his nose and then blow it out, and whoever cleans his private parts with stones should do so with odd numbers. And whoever wakes up from his sleep should wash his hands before putting them in the water for ablution, because nobody knows where his hands were during sleep. 29. Narrated Abdullah bin Amr, the Prophet, remained behind us on a journey. He joined us while we were performing ablution for the Asr prayer, which was overdue, and we were just passing wet hands over our feet, not washing them thoroughly, so he addressed us in a loud voice saying twice, save your heels from the fire. 30. Narrated Humran, sad-faced, the freed slave of Uthman bin Affan, I saw Uthman bin Affan asking for a tumbler of water to perform ablution, and when it was brought, he poured water from it over his hands and washed them thrice, and then put his right hand in the water container and rinsed his mouth and washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out. Then he washed his face thrice and, then, forearms up to the elbows thrice, then passed his wet hands over his head and then washed each foot thrice. After that Uthman said, I saw the Prophet performing ablution like this of mine, and he said, if anyone performs ablution like that of mine and offers a 2-rakat prayer during which he does not think of anything else, not related to the present prayer, then his past sins will be forgiven. 31. Narrated Muhammad ibn Ziyad, I heard Abu Huraira saying as he passed by us while the people were performing ablution from a utensil containing water, perform ablution perfectly and thoroughly for Abul Qasim, the Prophet said, save your heels from the hellfire. 32. Narrated Ubayd ibn Jurayj, I asked Abdullah bin Umar, O Abu Abdurrahman, I saw you doing 4 things which I never saw being done by any one of you companions. Abdullah bin Umar said, what are those, O Ibn Jurayj? I said, I never saw you touching any corner of the Kaaba except these 2, facing south, Yemen, and I saw you wearing shoes made of tanned leather and dyeing your hair with henna, a kind of red dye. I also noticed that whenever you were in Mecca, the people assume ihram on seeing the new moon crescent, first of Dhul Hijjah, while you did not assume the Ilal, ihram. Ihram is also called Ilal, which means loud calling, because a muhrim has to recite talbiyah aloud when assuming the state of ihram, till the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, day of Tarwiyah. Abdullah replied, regarding the corners of Kaaba, I never saw Allah's Messenger touching except those facing south, Yemen, and regarding the tanned leather shoes, no doubt I saw Allah's Messenger wearing non-hairy shoes, and he used to perform ablution while wearing the shoes, i.e. wash his feet and then put on the shoes. So I love to wear similar shoes. And about the dyeing of hair with henna, no doubt I saw Allah's Messenger dyeing his hair with it, and that is why I like to dye my hair with it. Regarding Ilal, I did not see Allah's Messenger assuming Ilal till he set out for Hajj, on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. 33. Narrated Amatiyah that the Prophet, at the time of washing his deceased daughter, had said to them, start from the right side beginning with those parts which are washed in ablution. 34. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet used to like to start from the right side on wearing shoes, combing his hair and cleaning or washing himself, and on doing anything else. 35. Narrated Anas bin Malik saw Allah's Messenger when the Asr prayer was due and the people searched for water to perform ablution but they could not find it. Later on, a pot full of water for ablution was brought to Allah's apostle. He put his hand in that pot and ordered the people to perform ablution from it. I saw the water springing out from underneath his fingers till all of them performed the ablution, it was one of the miracles of the Prophet. 36. Narrated Ibn Sirin, I said to Abida, I have some of the hair of the Prophet, which I got from Anas or from his family. Abida replied, no doubt if I had a single hair of that it would have been dearer to me than the whole world and whatever is in it. 37. Narrated Anas, when Allah's Messenger got his head shaved, Abu Talha was the first to take some of his hair. 38. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger said, if a dog drinks from the utensil of any one of you it is essential to wash it 7 times. 39. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, a man saw a dog eating mud from the severity of thirst. So, that man took a shoe, and filled it with water and kept on pouring the water for the dog till it quenched its thirst. So Allah approved of his deed and made him to enter paradise. 40. And narrated Hamza bin Abdullah, my father said, during the lifetime of Allah's apostle, the dogs used to urinate, and pass through the mosques, come and go, nevertheless they never used to sprinkle water on it, urine of the dog. 41. Narrated Adi bin Hatim, I asked the Prophet about the hunting dogs, and he replied, if you let loose, with Allah's name, your tamed dog after a game and it hunts it, you may eat it, but if the dog eats of that game, then do not eat it because the dog has hunted it for itself. I further said, sometimes I send my dog for hunting and find another dog with it. He said, do not eat the game for you have mentioned Allah's name only on sending your dog and not the other dog. 42. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger said, a person is considered in prayer as long as he is waiting for the prayer in the mosque as long as he does not do hadith. A non-Arab man asked, O Abu Huraira, what is hadith? I replied, it is the passing of wind, from the anus, that is one of the types of hadith. 43. Narrated Abad bin Tamim, my uncle said, the Prophet said, one should not leave his prayer unless he hears sound or smells something. 44. Narrated Ali, I used to get emotional urethral discharges frequently and felt shy to ask Allah's Messenger about it. So I requested Al-Miqdad bin al-Aswad to ask the Prophet about it. Al-Miqdad asked him and he replied, one has to perform ablution after it. 45. Narrated Zayd bin Khalid, I asked Uthman bin Affan about a person who engaged in intercourse but did no discharge. Uthman replied, he should perform ablution like the one for an ordinary prayer but he must wash his penis. Uthman added, I heard it from Allah's Messenger. I asked Ali Zubair, Talha and Ubay bin Kab about it and they, too, gave the same reply. This order was cancelled later on and taking a bath became necessary for such cases. 46. Narrated Abu said al-Qudri, Allah's Messenger, sent for an Ansari man who came with water dropping from his head. The Prophet said, perhaps we have forced you to hurry up, haven't we? The Ansari replied, yes. Allah's Messenger further said, if you are forced to hurry up during intercourse, or you do not discharge then ablution is due on you. This order was cancelled later on, i.e. one has to take a bath. 47. Narrated Usama bin Zaid, when Allah's Messenger departed from Arafat, he turned towards a mountain pass where he answered the call of nature. After he had finished, I poured water and he performed ablution and then I said to him, O Allah's Messenger, will you offer the prayer? He replied, the Musalla, place of the prayer, is ahead of you, in Al-Muzdalifah. 48. Narrated Al-Mughira bin Shuba, I was in the company of Allah's Messenger, on one of the journeys and he went out to answer the call of nature, and after he finished, I poured water and he performed ablution, he washed his face, forearms, and passed his wet hand over his head and over the 2 socks made from thick fabric or leather. 49. Narrated Abdullah bin Abbas, that he stayed overnight in the house of Maymuna the wife of the Prophet, his aunt. He added, I lay on the bed, cushioned transversely, while Allah's Messenger, and his wife lay in the lengthwise direction of the cushion. Allah's Messenger slept till the middle of the night, either a bit before or a bit after it and then woke up, rubbing the traces of sleep off his face with his hands. He then recited the last 10 verses of Surah Al-Imran, got up and went to a hanging water skin. He then performed the ablution from it, and it was a perfect ablution, and then stood up to offer the prayer. I, too, got up and did as the Prophet had done. Then I went and stood by his side. He placed his right hand on my head and caught my right ear and twisted it. He prayed 2 rakat, then 2 rakat and 2 rakat and then 2 rakat and then 2 rakat and then 2 rakat, separately 6 times, and finally 1 rakah, the witr. Then he lay down again in the bed till the muaddin came to him, whereupon the Prophet got up, offered a 2 light rakat prayer and went out and led the far prayer. 50. Narrated Asma bint Abu Bakr, I came to Aisha the wife of the Prophet, during the solar eclipse. The people were standing and offering the prayer, and she was also praying. I asked her, "What is wrong with the people?" She beckoned with her hand towards the sky and said, "Subhan Allah." I asked her, "Is there a sign?" She pointed out, "Yes." So I, too, stood for the prayer till I fell unconscious, and later on I poured water on my head. After the prayer, Allah's Messenger praised and glorified Allah and said, "Just now I have seen something which I never saw before at this place of mine, including paradise and hell. I have been inspired, and have understood, that you will be put to trials in your graves, and these trials will be like the trials of Ad-Dajjal, or nearly like it." The sub-narrator is not sure of what Asma said. Angels will come to every one of you and ask, "What do you know about this man?" A believer will reply, "He is Muhammad, Allah's messenger, and he came to us with self-evident truth and guidance. So we accepted his teaching, believed and followed him." Then the angels will say to him to sleep in peace, as they have come to know that he was a believer. On the other hand, a hypocrite or a doubtful person will reply, "I do not know, but heard the people saying something, and so I said the same." 51. Narrated Yahya al-Mazini, a person asked Abdullah bin Zayd, who was the grandfather of Amr bin Yahya, "Can you show me how Allah's Messenger used to perform ablution?" Abdullah bin Zayd replied in the affirmative and asked for water. He poured it on his hands and washed them twice, then he rinsed his mouth thrice and washed his nose with water thrice by putting water in it and blowing it out. He washed his face thrice, and after that he washed his forearms up to the elbows twice, and then passed his wet hands over his head from its front to its back and vice versa, beginning from the front and taking them to the back of his head up to the nape of the neck, and then brought them to the front again from where he had started, and washed his feet up to the ankles. 52. Narrated Amr, my father saw Amr bin Abi Hassan asking Abdullah bin Zayd about the ablution of the Prophet. Abdullah bin Zayd asked for earthenware pot containing water, and in front of them performed ablution like that of the Prophet. He poured water from the pot over his hand and washed his hands thrice, and then he put his hands in the pot and rinsed his mouth and washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out with 3 handfuls of water. Again he put his hand in the water and washed his face thrice and washed his forearms up to the elbows twice, and then put his hands in the water and then passed them over his head by bringing them to the front and then to the rear of the head once, and then he washed his feet up to the ankles. 53. Narrated Abu Juhayfa, Allah's Messenger, came to us at noon, and water for ablution was brought to him. After he had performed ablution, the remaining water was taken by the people and they started smearing their bodies with it, as a blessed thing. The Prophet offered 2 rakat of the Zuhr prayer and then 2 rakat of the Asr prayer, while a short spear, or stick, was there, as a sutra, in front of him. 54. Abu Musa said, the Prophet asked for a tumbler containing water and washed both his hands and face in it, and then threw a mouthful of water in the tumbler and said to both of us, Abu Musa and Bilal, drink from the tumbler and pour some of its water on your faces and chests. 55. Narrated Ibn Shihab, Mahmud bin Arabi, who was the person on whose face the Prophet had ejected a mouthful of water from his family's well while he was a boy, and Urwa, on the authority of Al-Maswar and others, who testified each other, said, whenever the Prophet performed ablution, his companions were nearly fighting for the remains of the water. 56. Narrated as Sa'ib bin Yazid, my aunt took me to the Prophet, and said, O Allah's Messenger, this son of my sister has got a disease in his legs. So he passed his hands on my head and prayed for Allah's blessings for me. then he performed ablution and I drank from the remaining water. I stood behind him and saw the seal of prophethood between his shoulders, and it was like the Zir al-Hijla, means the button of a small tent, but some said, egg of a partridge, etc. 57. Narrated Amr bin Yahya, sad face on the authority of his father, Abdullah bin Zaid poured water on his hands from a utensil containing water and washed them, and then with one handful of water he rinsed his mouth and cleaned his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out. He repeated it thrice. He, then, washed his hands and forearms up to the elbows twice and passed wet hands over his head, both forwards and backwards, and washed his feet up to the ankles and said, "This is the ablution of Allah's Messenger." 58. Narrated Amr bin Yahya, my father said, I saw Amr bin Abi Hassan asking Abdullah bin Zaid about the ablution of the Prophet. Abdullah bin Zaid asked for an earthenware pot containing water and performed ablution in front of them. He poured water over his hands and washed them thrice. Then he put his right hand in the pot and rinsed his mouth and washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out thrice with 3 handfuls of water. Again he put his hand in the water and washed his face thrice. After that he put his hand in the pot and washed his forearms up to the elbows twice and then again put his hand in the water and passed wet hands over his head by bringing them to the front and then to the back, and once more he put his hand in the pot and washed his feet, up to the ankles. Narrated Wahab, that he, the Prophet, in narration 191 above, had passed his wet hands on the head once only. 59. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, during the lifetime of Allah's Messenger, men and women used to perform ablution together. 60. Narrated Jabir, Allah's Messenger, came to visit me while I was sick and unconscious. He performed ablution and sprinkled the remaining water on me and I became conscious and said, O Allah's Messenger, to whom will my inheritance go, as I have neither ascendants nor descendants? Then the divine verses regarding Fara'id, inheritance, were revealed. 61. Narrated Anas, it was the time for prayer, and those whose houses were near got up and went to their people, to perform ablution, and there remained some people, sitting. Then a painted stove pot, mikdab, containing water was brought to Allah's Messenger. The pot was small, not broad enough for one to spread one's hand in, yet all the people performed ablution. The sub-narrator said, we asked Anas, how many persons were you? Anas replied, we were 80 or more. It was one of the miracles of Allah's Messenger. 62. Narrated Abu Musa, once the Prophet asked for a tumbler containing water. He washed his hands and face in it and also threw a mouthful of water in it. 63. Narrated Abdullah bin Zaid, once Allah's Messenger came to us and we brought out water for him in a brass pot. He performed ablution thus, he washed his face thrice, and his forearms to the elbows twice, then passed his wet hands lightly over the head from front to rear and brought them to front again and washed his feet, up to the ankles. 64. Narrated Aisha, when the ailment of the Prophet became aggravated and his disease became severe, he asked his wives to permit him to be nursed, treated, in my house. So they gave him the permission. Then the Prophet came to my house, with the support of 2 men, and his legs were dragging on the ground, between Abbas and another man. Ubaydullah, the sub-narrator, said, I informed Abdullah bin Abbas of what Aisha said. Ibn Abbas said, do you know who was the other man? I replied in the negative. Ibn Abbas said, he was Ali bin Abi Talib. Aisha further said, when the Prophet came to my house and his sickness became aggravated, he ordered us to pour 7 skins full of water on him, so that he might give some advice to the people. So he was seated in a mikdab, brass tub, belonging to Hafsa, the wife of the Prophet. Then, all of us started pouring water on him from the water skins till he beckoned to us to stop and that we have done what he wanted us to do. After that he went out to the people. 65. Narrated Amr bin Yahya, sad face on the authority of his father, my uncle used to perform ablution extravagantly, and once he asked Abdullah bin Zaid to tell him how he had seen the Prophet performing ablution. He asked for an earthenware pot containing water, and poured water from it on his hands and washed them thrice, and then put his hand in the earthenware pot and rinsed his mouth and washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out thrice with 1 handful of water. He again put his hand in the water and took a handful of water and washed his face thrice, then washed his hands up to the elbows twice, and took water with his hand, and passed it over his head from front to back and then from back to front, and then washed his feet, up to the ankles, and said, I saw the Prophet performing ablution in that way. 66. Narrated Thabit, Anas said, the Prophet asked for water and a tumbler with a broad base and nose so deep, containing a small quantity of water, was brought to him whereby he put his fingers in it. Anas further said, notice the water springing out from amongst his fingers. Anas added, estimated that the people who performed ablution with it numbered between 70 to 80. 67. Narrated Anas, the Prophet used to take a bath with 1 sa up to 5 muds, 1 sa equals muds, of water and used to perform ablution with 1 mud of water. 68. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas said, the Prophet passed wet hands over his cuffs, socks made from thick fabric or leather. Abdullah bin Umar asked Umar about it. Umar replied in the affirmative and added, whenever Sa'd narrates a hadith from the Prophet, there is no need to ask anyone else about it. 69. Narrated Al-Mughira bin Shuba, once Allah's messenger went out to answer the call of nature and I followed him with a tumbler containing water, and when he finished, I poured water and he performed ablution and passed wet hands over his cuffs, socks made from thick fabric or leather. 70. Narrated Ja'far bin Amr bin Umayyah ad-Damri, my father said, I saw the Prophet passing wet hands over his cuffs, socks made from thick fabric or leather. 71. Narrated Ja'far bin Amr, my father said, I saw the Prophet passing wet hands over his turban and cuffs, socks made from thick fabric or leather. 72. Narrated Urwa bin al-Mughira, my father said, once I was in the company of the Prophet, on a journey and I dashed to take off his cuffs, socks made from thick fabric or leather. He ordered me to leave them as he had put them after performing ablution. So he passed wet hands over them. 73. Narrated Abdullah bin Abbas, Allah's messenger, ate a piece of cooked mutton from the shoulder region and prayed without repeating ablution. 74. Narrated Ja'far bin Amr bin Umayyah, my father said, I saw Allah's messenger taking a piece of cooked mutton from the shoulder region and then he was called for prayer. He put his knife down and prayed without repeating ablution. 75. Narrated Suwaid bin al-Numan, in the year of the conquest of Khaybar I went with Allah's messenger, till we reached Saba, a place near Khaybar, where Allah's messenger offered the Asr prayer and asked for food. Nothing but sawiq was brought. He ordered it to be moistened with water. He and all of us ate it and the Prophet got up for the evening prayer, Maghrib prayer, rinsed his mouth with water and we did the same, and he then prayed without repeating the ablution. 76. Narrated Maymuna, the Prophet ate a piece of mutton from the shoulder region and then prayed without repeating the ablution. 77. Narrated Ibn Abbas, Allah's messenger, drank milk, rinsed his mouth and said, it has fat. 78. Narrated Aisha, Allah's messenger, said, if any one of you feels drowsy while praying he should go to bed, sleep, till his slumber is over because in praying while drowsy one does not know whether one is asking for forgiveness or for a bad thing for oneself. 79. Narrated Anas, the Prophet, said, if any one of you feels drowsy while praying, he should sleep till he understands what he is saying, reciting. 80. Narrated Amr bin Amir, Anas said, the Prophet used to perform ablution for every prayer. I asked Anas, what did you used to do? Anas replied, we used to pray with the same ablution until we break it with hadith. 81. Narrated Suwaid bin Numan, in the year of the conquest of Khaybar I went with Allah's messenger, till we reached Saba, where Allah's messenger led the Asr prayer and asked for the food. Nothing but sawiq was brought and we ate it and drank water. The Prophet got up for the Maghrib prayer, rinsed his mouth with water and then led the prayer without repeating the ablution. 82. Narrated Ibn Abbas, once the Prophet while passing through one of the graveyards of Medina or Mecca, heard the voices of two persons who were being tortured in their graves. The Prophet said, "These two persons are being tortured not for a major sin, to avoid." The Prophet then added, "Yes. They are being tortured for a major sin. Indeed, one of them never saved himself from being soiled with his urine, while the other used to go about with calumnies, to make enmity between friends." The Prophet then asked for a green leaf of a date palm tree, broke it into two pieces and put one on each grave. On being asked why he had done so, he replied, "I hope that their torture might be lessened, till these get dried." 83, narrated Anas bin Malik, "Whenever the Prophet went to answer the call of nature, I used to bring water with which he used to clean his private parts." 84, narrated Ibn Abbas, "The Prophet once passed by two graves and said, 'These two persons are being tortured not for a major sin, to avoid.' One of them never saved himself from being soiled with his urine, while the other used to go about with calumnies, to make enmity between friends." The Prophet then took a green leaf of a date palm tree, split it into pieces, and fixed one on each grave. They said, "O Allah's Apostle, why have you done so?" He replied, "I hope that their punishment might be lessened till these, the pieces of the leaf, become dry." See the footnote of Hadith. 85, narrated Anas bin Malik, "The Prophet saw a Bedouin making water in the mosque and told the people not to disturb him. When he finished, the Prophet asked for some water and poured it over the urine." 86, narrated Abu Huraira, "A Bedouin stood up and started making water in the mosque. The people caught him, but the Prophet ordered them to leave him and to pour a bucket or a tumbler of water over the place where he had passed the urine. The Prophet then said, 'You have been sent to make things easy and not to make them difficult.'" 87, narrated Anas bin Malik, "The Prophet said as above." 88, narrated Aisha, sad-faced, the mother of faithful believers, "A child was brought to Allah's Messenger, and it urinated on the garment of the Prophet. The Prophet asked for water and poured it over the soiled place." 89, narrated Qays bint Myson, "I brought my young son, who had not started eating ordinary food, to Allah's Messenger, who took him and made him sit in his lap. The child urinated on the garment of the Prophet, so he asked for water and poured it over the soiled area, and did not wash it." 90, narrated Hudhaifa, "Once the Prophet went to the dumps of some people and passed urine while standing. He then asked for water, and so I brought it to him and he performed ablution." 91, narrated Hudhaifa, "The Prophet and I walked till we reached the dumps of some people. He stood, as any one of you stands, behind a wall and urinated. I went away, but he beckoned me to come. So I approached him and stood near his back till he finished." 92, narrated Abu Wail, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari used to lay great stress on the question of urination, and he used to say, if anyone from Bani Israel happened to soil his clothes with urine, he used to cut that portion away. Hearing that, Hudhaifa said to Abu Wail, "I wish he, Abu Musa, didn't lay great stress on that matter." Hudhaifa added, "Allah's Messenger went to the dumps of some people and urinated while standing." 93, narrated Asma, "A woman came to the Prophet and said, 'If any one of us gets menses in her clothes, then what should she do?' He replied, 'She should take hold of the soiled place, rub it and put it in the water and rub it in order to remove the traces of blood and then pour water over it. Then she can pray in it." 94, narrated Aisha, "Fatima bint Abi Hubaysh came to the Prophet and said, 'O Allah's Messenger, I get persistent bleeding from the uterus and do not become clean. Shall I give up my prayers?' Allah's Messenger replied, 'No, because it is from a blood vessel and not the menses. So when your real menses begins, give up your prayers, and when it has finished, wash off the blood, take a bath, and offer your prayers.'" Hisham, the sub-narrator, narrated that his father had also said, "The Prophet told her, perform ablution for every prayer till the time of the next period comes." 95, narrated Aisha, "I used to wash the traces of janaba, semen, from the clothes of the Prophet, and he used to go for prayers while traces of water were still on it, water spots were still visible. 96. Narrated Sulayman bin Yasar, I asked Aisha about the clothes soiled with semen. She replied, I used to wash it off the clothes of Allah's Messenger, and he would go for the prayer while water spots were still visible. 97. Narrated Amr bin Maimun, I heard Sulayman bin Yasar talking about the clothes soiled with semen. He said that Aisha had said, I used to wash it off the clothes of Allah's Messenger, and he would go for the prayers while water spots were still visible on them. 98. Narrated Aisha, I used to wash the semen off the clothes of the Prophet, and even then I used to notice one or more spots on them. 99. Narrated Abu Kalaba, Anas said, some people of Uql or Urana tribe came to Medina and its climate did not suit them. So the Prophet ordered them to go to the herd of milch camels and to drink their milk and urine as a medicine. So they went as directed, and after they became healthy, they killed the shepherd of the Prophet and drove away all the camels. The news reached the Prophet early in the morning, and he sent men in their pursuit, and they were captured and brought at noon. He then ordered to cut their hands and feet, and it was done, and their eyes were branded with heated pieces of iron. They were put in al-Hara, and when they asked for water, no water was given to them. Abu Kalaba said, those people committed theft and murder, became infidels after embracing Islam and fought against Allah and His Apostle. 100. Narrated Anas, prior to the construction of the mosque, the Prophet offered the prayers at sheepfolds. 101. Narrated Maymuna, Allah's Messenger, was asked regarding ghee, cooking butter, in which a mouse had fallen. He said, take out the mouse and throw away the ghee around it and use the rest. 102. Narrated Maymuna, the Prophet, was asked regarding ghee in which a mouse had fallen. He said, take out the mouse and throw away the ghee around it, and use the rest. 103. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet, said, a wound which a Muslim receives in Allah's cause will appear on the day of resurrection as it was at the time of infliction, blood will be flowing from the wound and its color will be that of the blood but will smell like musk. 104. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, we, Muslims, are the last people to come in the world, but will be the foremost on the day of resurrection. 105. The same narrator said that the Prophet had said, you should not pass urine in stagnant water which is not flowing, then you may need to wash in it. 106. Narrated Abdullah, while Allah's Messenger was prostrating, as stated below. Narrated Abdullah bin Masud, once the Prophet was offering prayers at the Kaaba. Abu Jahl was sitting with some of his companions. One of them said to the others, who amongst you will bring the abdominal contents, intestines, etc., of a camel of Bani so and put it on the back of Muhammad, when he prostrates? The most unfortunate of them got up and brought it. He waited till the Prophet prostrated and then placed it on his back between his shoulders. I was watching but could not do anything. I wish I had some people with me to hold out against them. They started laughing and falling on one another. Allah's Messenger was in prostration and he did not lift his head up till Fatima, Prophet's daughter, came and threw that camel's abdominal contents away from his back. He raised his head and said thrice, O Allah! Punish Quraysh. So it was hard for Abu Jahl and his companions when the Prophet invoked Allah against them, as they had a conviction that the prayers and invocations were accepted in this city, Mecca. The Prophet said, O Allah! Punish Abu Jahl, Utbah bin Rabia, Shaiba bin Rabia, Al-Walid bin Utbah, Umayyah bin Khalaf, and Uqbah bin al-Mu'at. And he mentioned the seventh whose name I cannot recall. By Allah in whose hands my life is, I saw the dead bodies of those persons who were counted by Allah's Messenger, in the Kalib, one of the wells, of Badr. 107. Narrated Anas, the Prophet once spat in his clothes. 108. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet said, all drinks that produce intoxication are haram, forbidden to drink. 109. Narrated Abu Hazim, Sal bin Sa'd as-Sa'di, was asked by the people, with what was the wound of the Prophet treated? Sal replied, none remains among the people living who knows that better than I, Bali. used to bring water in his shield, and Fatima used to wash the blood off his face. Then straw mat was burnt and the wound was filled with it. 110, narrated Abu Burda, my father said, I came to the Prophet, and saw him carrying a siwak in his hand and cleansing his teeth, saying, you, as if he was retching while the siwak was in his mouth. 111, narrated Hudhaifa, whenever the Prophet got up at night, he used to clean his mouth with siwak. 112, narrated Ibn Gumar, the Prophet said, I dreamt that I was cleaning my teeth with a siwak and two persons came to me. One of them was older than the other and I gave the siwak to the younger. I was told that I should give it to the older and so I did. 113, narrated Al-Bara bin Azib, the Prophet said to me, whenever you go to bed perform ablution like that for the prayer, lie on your right side and say, Allahumma aslamtu waji alayka, wa fawatu amri alayka, wa alyatu zari alayka ragbatan wa rabatan alayka. La malja'a wa la manja minka illa alayka. Allahumma amantu bika al-ladi anzalta wa bina bayika al-ladi arzalta, O Allah. I surrender to you and entrust all my affairs to you and depend upon you for your blessings both with hope and fear of you. There is no fleeing from you, and there is no place of protection and safety except with you, O Allah. I believe in your book, the Quran, which you have revealed, and in your Prophet, Muhammad, whom you have sent. Then if you die on that very night, you will die with faith, i.e., or the religion of Islam. Let the aforesaid words be your last utterance, before sleep. I repeated it before the Prophet, and when I reached, Allahumma amanta bika al-ladi anzalta, O Allah, I believe in your book which you have revealed. I said, Wa Rasulika, and your apostle. The Prophet said, no, but say, Wa nabiyaka al-ladi arzalta, your prophet whom you have sent, instead.